Mic check 1 2 1 2. Can anybody hear me in the chat? Underrated Mind, what's going on? Thank you for the one. Marvin Evans, what's going on? AO, yo, Faber, peace of you. GLX, what's going on? All right. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Doc in the description beneath the video. This one is going to be pretty short tonight. So tonight's Tech Talk is episode 256, SysAdmin's and cybersecurity. Just as an FYI, I'm still doing IT mentorship. If you're trying to get into IT or you're trying to transition from one career to another in IT, I can help you out with that. Is this topic going to talk about the kind of job cybersecurity and sysadmin does? To an extent, yeah. To an extent, we got articles that we're going to just cover, and then we'll kind of give our analysis on what we do and how we approach certain things, and in reference to the article and in reference to our day-to-day operations. I'll I'll get started in the next 60 seconds and see how you guys fall in the chat. So Q4, what's going on? Yeah, cybersecurity is it's a mindset. So they didn't really just jump into it. Um, Deep technology is going on. So cybersecurity is a bit of a niche factor, and it's not for the faint of heart. So that's the high level of it. Hey, what's going on, information man? Yeah, Trump doesn't use a laptop. Somebody else uses it, but it's not him. I'll leave it at that. Mega Montana, what's going on? Kareem Austin, what's going on? All right, let's get started. Come on. All right, so first item on the docket is what you need to know to be a sysadmin. So what is a sysadmin? Sysadmin is short for system administrator, and sysadministrators basically um, cover all things tech in the environment from an operational standpoint. So with that being said, all your Windows systems, all your Linux systems, all um, your desktops and printers and everything that has an IP address, and then that can load up software. Sysadmins cover the gamut of all of that. So let me jump into the article, and then we'll go into some kind of Q&A on this part. All right, this one's from OpenSource.com. The system administrator of yesteryear jockeyed users and wrangled servers all day. In between, let me expand this out. In between mornings and evenings spent running hundreds of cables. This is still true today, with the added complexity of cloud computing, containers, and virtual machines. Looking in from the outside, it can be difficult to pinpoint what exactly a system admin does because they play at least a small role in so many places. Nobody goes into a career already knowing everything they need for a job, but everyone needs a strong foundation. If you're going to start down the path of a system administrator, here's what you should be concentrating on in your professional or formal training. Bash. When you learn Bash Shell, you don't just learn the Bash Shell, you learn a common interface to Linux systems, BSD, Mac OS, and even Windows under the right conditions. You learn the importance of syntax so you can quickly adapt to the systems like Cisco Routers command line or Microsoft PowerShell, and eventually you can even learn more powerful languages like Python or Go. And you also begin to think procedurally so you can analyze complex problems and break them down into individual components, which is key because that's how systems like the internet or organizations intranet or a web server or a backup solution are designed. Wait, there's more. Knowing the bash shell has become particularly important because of the recent trend toward DevOps and containers. Your career as a sysadmin may lead you into a world where infrastructure is treated like code, which usually means you'll have to know the basics of scripting, the structure of YAML-based configuration. YAML stands for yet another markup language. And how to interact with containers, tiny Linux systems running inside of a sandbox file. Knowing Bash is the gateway to efficient management of the most exciting open source technology, so go get born again. So Bash stands for Born Again Shell, BASH. There are many ways to get practice in the Bash shell. Try a portable Linux distribution. You don't have to install Linux to use Linux, so grab a spare thumb drive and spend your evenings and weekends getting comfortable with a text-based interface. There are several excellent Bash articles available here on opensource.com, as well as enable SysAdmin. The problem with telling someone to practice with Bash is that to practice you must have something to do, and until you know how to use Bash, you probably won't be able to think of anything to do. If that's your situation, go to the over the wire and play Bandit. It's a game aimed at absolute beginners with 34 levels, interactive basic hacking to get you comfortable with the Linux shell. Web servers. Once you're comfortable with Bash, you should try setting up a web server. Not all sysadmins go around setting up web servers or even maintain web servers, but the skills you acquire while installing and starting the HTTP daemon, configuring Apache or Nginx, setting up the correct permissions, and configuring the firewall are the same skills you need on a daily basis. After a little bit of effort, you may start to notice certain patterns in behavior in your labor. There are concepts you probably took for granted before trying to administer production-ready software and hardware, and you're no longer shielded from them in your fledgling role as an administrator. It might be frustrating at first because everyone likes to be good at everything they do, but that's actually a good thing. Let yourself be bad at new skills. That's how you learn. And besides, the more you struggle through your first steps, the sweeter it is when you finally see that triumphant it works. Default index .html. David Boff wrote an excellent article on Apache web server configuration. For extra credit, step through his follow-step article on how to host multiple sites on one machine. All right, this is DHCP. The Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol is the system that assigns IP addresses to devices on a network. At home, the modem or router your ISP supports probably has embedded DHCP server in it, so it's likely out of your pure view. If you've ever logged into your home router to adjust the IP addresses range or set up static addresses for some of your network devices, then you're at least somewhat familiar with the concept. You may understand that devices on the network are assigned the equivalent of phone numbers in the form of IP addresses. And you may realize that computers communicate with one another by broadcasting messages addressed to the specific IP address. Message headers are read by routers along the path, each of which works to direct the message to the next most logical router along the path toward its ultimate goal. Even if you understand these concepts, the inevitable escalation of basic familiarity with DHCP is to set up a DHCP server. Installing and configuring your own DHCP server provides you the opportunity to introduce DHCP collisions on your home network. Try to avoid that if you can, as it will definitely kill your network until it's resolved. Control the distribution of addresses, create subnets, and monitor connections and lease times. More importantly, setting up DHCP and experimenting with different configurations helps you understand internetworking. You understand how networks represent partitions in a data transference and what steps you have to take to pass information from one to another. That's vital for a sysadmin to know because the network is easily one of the most important aspects of the job. Before running your own DHCP server, ensure that the DHCP server in your home router is inactive. Once you have it up and running, read Arcit's Arcit Modi's Guide to Network Commands for tips on how to explore your network. It might sound mundane, but getting familiar with how network cables work not only makes for really a fun weekend, but also gives you a whole new understanding of how data gets across the wires. The best way to learn is to go to your local hobby shop or purchase a Cat5 cable and a crimper and a few Cat5 terminators. Then head home, grab a spare Ethernet cable, and cut the terminators off. Spend whatever amount of time it takes to get that cable back in commission. Once you have resolved that puzzle, do it again, this time creating a working crossover cable. You should also start how observing now about cable management. If you're not naturally inclined to run cables neatly along the floor molding or the edges of a desk, or to bind cables together to keep them orderly, then make it a goal to permanently condition yourself with a phobia of messy cables. You won't understand why this is necessary at first, but the first time you walk into a server room, you immediately know. All right, Ansible. Ansible is a configuration management software, and it's a bit of a bridge between SysAdmin and DevOps. SysAdmins use Ansible to configure fresh installs of an operating system and to maintain specific states on machines. DevOps uses Ansible to reduce time and effort spent on tooling so that more time and effort gets spent on developing. You should learn Ansible as part of your SysAdmin training with an eye toward the practices of DevOps, because most of what DevOps is pioneering now will end up as part of your workflow in the sysadministration of the future. The good thing about Ansible is that you can start using it now. It's cross-platform and it scales both up and down. Ansible may be overkill for a single user computer, but then again, Ansible could change the way you spin up virtual machines, or it could help you synchronize the states of all computers in your home or home lab. Read How to Manage Your Workstation Configuration with Ansible by Jay LaCroix for the quintessential introduction to get started with Ansible on a casual basis. Problems arise on computers because of user error, buggy software, administrator error, and any number of other factors. There's no way to predict what's going to fail or why. So part of your personal sysadmin training regime should be to poke at the system you set up until they fail. You are going, the worse you are able, the worse you are to own, the worse you are to own your lab infrastructure, the more likely you are to find weak points. And the more often you repair those weak spots, the more confident you become in your problem-solving skills. Aside from rigors of setting up all the usual software and hardware, your primary job as a sysadmin is to find solutions. There will be times when you encounter a problem outside of your job description, and it may not even be feasible for you to fix it. But it will be up to you to find a workaround. The more you break stuff now and work to fix it, the better prepared you will be to work as a sysadmin. So this is actually a really good article, and it came into my inbox the other day. What's going on? Keep it techie. He dropped off. Okay. So the article is actually very accurate. I would say 99% accurate. Um, this is actually a very good guide for those of you who want to get into IT um, at the entry level, right? Sysadmins do a lot more um, non-tech work. The article doesn't really focus on. There's a lot of managerial work and administrative work, clerical work that gets involved, such as writing documentation and stuff like that. Um, if you want to get into IT at the desktop level, you'll probably bypass. Let's say you get into the desktop level. Okay, fine. You got your A plus. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You studied the book. You got your certification. You're doing desktop work. Okay, fine. This guide is really, really good to get you out of that desktop role and into a sysadmin role. Um, I know a lot of guys now run VMs on their machines, but I always recommend having two different laptops. If you're gonna break something that's not gonna be your daily driver. I don't work as a sysadmin per se, but I work in. I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Who just joined? Oh, okay, that's Josh. What's going on? Keep it techie.
What's up, man?
Oh man,
Yeah.
do you have anything you want to add about the article? There's a lot of feedback coming from you.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Hold on. That's the thing. I couldn't get on for some reason on my computer, but I got on my phone. But um, I just wanted to say that was a great. I mean, that's a good article. It covers a lot of stuff, especially when it comes to uh, DevOps. I remember reading that part in the article.
Hmm.
Um, that's real big, like Linux, Bash, command line. I mean, that's getting intertwined into everything. Windows, PowerShell. I mean, it's so you can't be intimidated with to the command line. You know what I'm saying? You got to get out of that if you are, and start learning it, um, because that's where everything is going, especially managing, systems. So.
Hmm. Yeah, this is actually a good. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback coming from you, Keep it techie. Yeah,
So
yeah, this is actually a very good crash course. Doesn't go into all the detail. I wish it went into more detail. I think somebody should write a um a book on like a crash course on sysadmin, being a sysadmin for the most part, a modern day sysadmin, not something from like the 90s where Windows NT 4.0. I'm talking about Server 2012, Server 2016, Exchange, um, obviously CentOS or Debian or something like that. What you can do with it, how to go about doing it. I have yet to see a guide like this posted. Usually, you got to collect a bunch of different books to actually to get this done. So for me, um, if I was going from a desktop again, like back in the early days, if I was going from a desktop person to a sysadmin, I would want a guide that would teach me all of those skills in one sitting. I know there's like videos on CBT Nuggets that you can get. Um, those videos are really good too. I've used those to help me pass other certifications. But for me, having a actual reference book that says you okay on Monday you're starting as a sysadmin. This is what you need to know going in, and this is how um, to go about it. They don't. There's no book like that out there unless you collect a whole bunch of articles and guides and stuff. So Maybe I could write a book like that. I probably could. Oh, Faber asked in the chat, is it feasible to learn to program and IT simultaneously or become proficient at both? Depends on what it is you're trying to program and what part of IT you're getting into. I mean, if you're going to be an IT help desk person and you're learning to write Java, I don't see the correlation between the two. I think it all has to be relevant.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Mike. And also, but different parts of or different aspects of IT, they're all going to automation, which requires programming. So, I mean, if you're a systems admin, you're a help desk, they looking for automation in their area. So, I mean, learning picking up some type of programming language, whether it's Python or something to that effect, will help you greatly in your career. So.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely agree with that. Mugen Black asks, what is the difference between a SOC analyst and a cyber engineer? And a
Hello? Anybody?
I can hear you. Keep it. Can anybody else hear us?
Yeah, I think Mike kind of fell off, or it fell off, or
Please hit one if you can hit us in the chat room, please. Thank you, Richard. Okay, I guess we're going to wait for Mike. Give me just a minute. The SOC office question that we had in the chat room. Yep. Mugen Black. What is the difference between a SOC analyst, a cyber engineer, and a pen tester? At my job, we got a cyber operations department. They're pretty much operations. They check all the servers and stuff at night, make sure the updates get pushed out. SOC, I'm trying to remember what that is. Systems Office Center, I believe. I think that's just where you work in the cloud.
or I wonder if it's security operations center. I don't know.
Security Office Center.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but that's what I was thinking when you said when he said SOC. So
Yep. Security Operations Center
yeah, yeah.
and pen testing. You want to take that? I haven't done too much pen testing. Most pen testing I've done is like, brute force attacks, passwords, and hey, your password's not strong enough. You're going to do something better than that.
Yeah, I haven't really messed with much pen testing myself. I just kind of dabble with it on the side, just messing around with it just to get my feet wet with it. But I mean, all the tools are out there for you to explore. You can download Kali Linux or Parrot OS, which has the same. They all have the same tools in it. Orch. There's another one, Black Orch Linux. I mean, they all have the same tools. It's just a different flavor, and that's what's used in a lot of pen testing. They use a lot of those tools that are included in Kali Linux, Parrot OS, and all that. And, they got a slew of them. I got videos on it, so you can check it out if you want to.
Here we go. Here we go. Mike?
Yeah, I lost my connection temporarily. Stupid net. Let me catch up. I don't know what I missed. What was the last thing that you guys were talking about?
I was trying to answer Mutant Black's question about SOC, cyber, and pen testing. What's the difference?
Yeah, so pen testing is basically ethical hacking. So basically white hat hacking for the organization or enterprise. And then cyber engineer was something that was it's a vague term, but a cybersecurity engineer does all the high level stuff of security operations, and then a SOC analyst basically does incident response. That's just the high level of it. I missed quite a few.
Okay, now my system started to mess up. I might have to drop off and get back on.
All right. Let me go back up to the top because I missed quite a few things. I'm not a CCNA. I don't even deal with Cisco equipment for the most part. If anything, we have a Palo Alto firewall. Oh, do you think there is a career path from being a Linux sysadmin to a DevOps engineer? So DevOps is a buzzword, but it's a methodology. It's a methodology of people and process. And what's happening here is that the term is being used all over the place, but a DevOps engineer would just be a systems engineer for the most part. It's above a sysadmin. You know, DevOps being developer in operations, developers write the code and ops actually engineers the rest of the portions of it. So the that piece of assist admin to DevOps would be a site reliability engineer, and that's where Linux does come in very much handy. So let me see some of these other comments before we move on to the next article. All right, let me move on to the next article. I've never used Arch Linux anti-gravity. I, I always stick with CentOS. It's the closest thing to Red Hat and a production level of Red Hat, since that's what most companies and organizations use is RHEL, which is Red Hat Enterprise Linux.
Yeah, I agree. It's Rail is the industry standard. So CentOS is pretty much the same thing. But I have worked with Arch. I use Arch on my Linux every day. I mean on my laptop every day. It's just one of my favorite distributions. Like they have different flavors. It just operates differently. As far as like one big difference from, let's say, CentOS, Ubuntu, and Arch is the package manager. It uses the same packages, but it has a different package manager in the way it handles the installation of applications onto the system. But it's the same applications. You see what I'm saying? So.
Mm-hmm. Well, unless you want to, count like Yum versus RPM, right? For package
Yeah,
management.
exactly. Yeah, because like Ubuntu, for example, uses apt or apt-get, which is, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. And then Arch uses the Pacman package manager, which is, I mean, you have to type that in to install the packages. And then CentOS is the Yum. Yeah, and I haven't used CentOS that much, but I mean, it's pretty much the same at the end of the day. So.
All right, let me get to this next article. RedHat.com, locking down SSHD. Learn how to keep your system files safe and prevent unauthorized access through SSH by following these simple suggestions. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'll read about a minute of it. SSH, or Secure Shell, replaced Telnet somewhere in the 1990s as the remote access protocol of choice. And for good reason. SSH allows administrators or users to access a remote shell through a secure tunnel by connecting their SSH client to an SSH server. SSH can handle file transfers, which should replace FTP, though there are a surprising number of situations which still rely on good old clear text FTP. For the reasons above, modern Linux systems are managed through SSH. Most experienced sysadmins love the direct access and power they get from securely connecting to their system shell with relative ease. In this article, I'll talk specifically about Open SSH Server Daemon SSHD. We'll cover some of the security problems you can run into and how to mitigate or outright solve them. As I mentioned, SSH is a powerful tool, though in SSH session, through an SSH session, you can connect a virtual terminal directly to your target system. In the wrong hands, the ability can be problematic. So why do we leave such power accessible? Well, the power of SSH involves a delicate balance. Within minutes, an administrator can have a secure session open to their server to respond to an incident. The simplicity is elegant. SSH is also at the core of automation tools like Ansible, We talked about Ansible in the last article. Ansible can apply changes to a system through SSH without the need of an agent. All changes are carried out instead using SSH or in Python. SSH can also be used, as I mentioned, for secure file transfers. For example, rsync tunnels through SSH for secure data synchronization. SSH can also be used to tunnel through one system to get to another, which is great for troubleshooting, but also great for an attacker. If the preceding paragraphs haven't convinced you, I'll say this again. SSH is a powerful tool, and like any powerful tool, it can be abused. If an attacker can gain a secure shell into your system, it's game over. And attackers know this, so they are constantly looking for systems with SSH open to the world so they can attack. The single most common attack against SSH is brute force. On my systems, I personally have never had a brute force attack succeed against SSH. However, before I started following simple lockdown rules, I can tell you they certainly tried. A quick search on Shodan, a search engine that targets internet-connected devices, shows 20,984,090 systems with SSH open to the world. Do they need to be set up this way? I can almost guarantee you that each and every one of those systems receives several SSH brute force attacks per second. While I was writing this article, I started a droplet on DigitalOcean, left SSH open to the world, and tailed varlog secure. Within around 20 minutes, I saw the first SSH probe. Within an hour, the flood of brute force attacks started. So this is a dump log of the brute force attempts against the SSH port. In short, a bad password on a default SSHD installation could be all that stands between the bad guys and your system. While the default configuration for OpenSSH is decently secure, it can stand to be hardened. Luckily for you, I have suggestions. Restrict access to port 22. Start by checking to see if the default SSH port is open to the world. You can do this by running Nmap, which will probe your network according to specifications. Narrowing down who can access port 22 is the most basic thing you can do to secure your system. I realize that this tactic may not work for every scenario. Maybe you're running a public use system, or maybe the CIO travels a lot and might access systems from many different places. My point is that you may have a valid reason that SSH absolutely needs to be open to the general public. Think very hard about avoiding that configuration, though. I've done it, but mostly out of laziness. There's usually a better way. If you're using a cloud provider, configure a security group to only accepting SSH traffic from the network you're working from. This task should be simple if you're accessing this provider from an enterprise environment. You probably have your own IP range, address range, which means that you can whitelist it and block everything else. If you're accessing the cloud provider from home, though, you may have to perform some tricks to whitelist your ISP's dynamically allocated IP block. Using a security group should let you change the IP address range through your cloud provider's self-service portal if needed. If you're hosting a system that's not behind a firewall, use the host-based firewall to block port 22 from anywhere but your IP address range, using the same methods I just described. The problem here, of course, is that if you're locked out because your IP address changed, you'll have a hard time making the necessary changes. Okay, let's talk about that traveling CIO who absolutely needs access to SSH from a hotel room. The solution seems obvious to those of us who have been around the block. But if you're considering opening SSH access to the entire world, maybe you need to hear this. A VPN or virtual private network lets you build an encrypted tunnel from an endpoint like your CIO's laptop at the hotel in Maui back to your enterprise network in Seattle. This connection is protected in its own way and encrypted. However, your dozens of servers that aren't accessible to the world could become accessible through this single point. Yes, the practice shifts the attack target to the VPN, but that means there's one more hurdle for the bad guys to get through. Deny root access. Now we're getting down to the actual SSH configuration. The Open SSH daemon has an option called permit root login. By default, this option is set to yes, since when you install some systems, only root exists at first. When the situation happens, you need the root account in order to access the system and perform the initial configuration. I recommend adding a user during the install process or as part of your golden image and turning root logins off from the get-go. Implement key-based authentication. Initially, I used key-based authentication as a convenience. I generated a private key, adding a public key to my authorized keys files on the servers I manage, and could then securely connect to my system without a password. Doing this saved time and made automation possible. When? It wasn't until later that I found out that the SSH key-based authentication can be leveraged to eliminate password brute force attempts. To generate a key, run SSH keygen on a Mac or Linux box. Maybe you Windows folks can do this privately now or natively now. Well, on Windows machines, I've always used puttygen. You'll be asked for a type of key and the length. I've been making 4096-bit RSA keys lately. The more bits, the harder the key is to crack. So why not? This is a dump of the keygen. What you end up with is a new file called test key. In this case, in test key pub. The key in test key is my private key, and the test key pub contains the public key. Protect the private key with your life. Disable password-based authentication. Remember when I said that key-based authentication opens you to possibility of locking down SSH brute force attempts completely. Now, well, here's how. With your private and public keys in place, SSH isn't prompting you for your password anymore, right? So why leave that avenue open as a vector? On every Linux server I run, I added my public key as part of the base install and turn off SSH password authentication before the system even hits the network. This is a setting right in SSD's configuration file. Again, the default setting allows password authentication because that feature has to work for configuration. Once you have your keys in place, though, turn that off. I'm not going to read this whole entire thing. It's pretty self-explanatory for SysAdmin because this is really what this is geared towards. It's really talking about from a Linux perspective. Josh, you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, I mean, with SSH, everything he does in that server is right, or everything he said in that article is correct. You wanna lock it down. Like, for instance, when he was talking in the beginning about Shodan, which is a website that's a information gathering tool that a lot of hackers, as well as white hat hackers, black hat hackers, all that, they use that to find vulnerabilities and find vulnerable servers on the web. So if you spin up a server or a system and you got SSH enabled, everything that guy listed in the article is something that you need to take into account when setting it up. For instance, I have a video where I step people through this. There are other tools that you can add to your server as well to manage stuff like it's one called fail to ban. Is basically as people hit your server, that IP address will get logged, and if it's a failed attempt, and what he was saying about turning off password, that's what prevents it. I only have keys set up on all my servers, but when you get a failed password attempt, it'll capture it in the authentication logs, and then that script will actually monitor those authentication logs and ban that IP, because the IP is sent to the server when you're trying to connect via SSH, and so it'll add it to what they call IP tables, which is the firewall, Linux firewall, and block any attempts in the future for that. Well, depending on how you have it configured as well, any attempts from that IP address. So it'll block that whole IP range. And a lot of times those guys are using different proxies and all that stuff. And all you're really doing is blocking a proxy or the VPN or whatever they're going through, Tor network, whatever they're going through. It'll block that IP, and then they have to modify. It basically slows them down because they have to keep modifying their brute force script, because a lot of these guys don't really know what they're doing. They just running a script and hoping for the best. And there are people out there that have default passwords set up on there, and it's open up, so they do get lucky, you know what I'm saying? But everything in this article you pointed out, Mike, is correct, spot on. So that's all I wanted to say.
Isn't this just part of hardening your system?
Yep. It is, but it's from Red Hat, so Red Hat's always going to try to
push it.
Yeah, because that's just what they do to the open source community, right? It's always good to have that knowledge available. But Young Grizzly's on the panel. Long time no speak, Young Grizzly. What's going on?
Hey, what's up, brother? How y'all doing?
I'm chilling, man. You have anything you want to add to this article?
All right, so I saw the title, so I had to answer the call there on that one. I got in kind of late as far as the keys were concerned, but PSKs have been used for a while and have been probably, along with shutting down like sudo access, or sorry, not sudo access, but hardening sudo access, and then shutting down the root user access via password. For a while, that's been a big deal, especially if you're using anything on the AWS platform. A lot of times they're going to actually have you generate PSKs to access any server. So I have a web hosting server via a client that I have to use a PSK from a specific server to access, anything on that web server itself.
Yeah, so my perspective on this is that overall, this is a part of the daily maintenance of a SysAdmin. Basically, SysAdmins do all of this type of work, and that if you're trying to be a SysAdmin at this point, you got to go through those two articles to really understand that SysAdmins, for all intents and purposes, are generalists. They're IT generalists. They cover a gamut of things, networking included. Typically, networking in the enterprise or any organization that's big enough usually have a separate network engineer to break up the roles and responsibilities, so that there's no one sole power behind everything. But sysadmins don't usually get into network engineering or network science or network architecture and things like that, because that's usually out of their scope of responsibilities. Now, they do sit in on these sort of meetings because they have to have an understanding of what's coming down the pike for them. Same thing with security, right? So they don't actually get too deep into cybersecurity or information security, for that matter, because that's not their sole responsibility. 2/3 of their responsibility has to do with keeping uptime on servers, instances in AWS and things of that nature, whether whatever is broadcasting to keep business continuity going. That's what their responsibility is. So, oh, let me share a site too. I think that might be helpful to some people.
Hey, question: is there any issue with my audio or anything like that?
No, you're good.
Good. Okay, cool. Sure. Thank you.
All right, let me share my screen real quick. All right, this one is adminmagazine.com. So admin is network and security magazine. This is like a must-have if you're going to be a system administrator. You're going to be a sysadmin, gotta have a subscription to this magazine.
It's about, what is it, 20 a month, 20 a quarter?
I don't know. Sometimes they give it away at Micro Center and those places, but
Oh man, okay, I need to go find me a Micro Center. That magazine is good. I've gotten a lot of good information, scripts and stuff I use at my job. Yeah, that totally need to read that magazine. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So this is actually a very good place for you to learn some new stuff. Like Christian just said, they constantly post very unique articles that are like things that you haven't even thought of or things that you have not implemented yourself. So definitely jump in on this. I actually this week actually met the guy who was who found a Zoom vulnerability security or security vulnerability in the Zoom software here in Boston at the security meetup. So these are the type of things that you want to be subscribed to. I'm going to share this in the chat as well. It's worth its weight in gold. I use it every month, so. You have any advice, your Grizzly, on SysAdmin Linux certification that you've taken? Anything that any advice you want to give to like a newbie that's trying to get into the tech field?
If you're looking for a Linux certification, anybody just hit me up at my email, aoe4eva@gmail. And I have my notes from when I took my Linux Plus certification a couple years ago. But the biggest thing is immerse yourself in the environment. One of the sites that I use quite a bit, and Mike, you could bring this page up if you want, howtoforge.com. So along with the admin magazine, I used to read that quite a bit as well and buy it at Barnes and Nobles. And I used to get the admin magazine until they started taking it off the shelves, and it really became a like an email, mostly like I got the emails for it. But How to Forge was another great source of information, along with the admin magazine, which had quite a few different like projects and things that you could do. And the biggest thing, and with this, is just really get yourself in there and find projects to do. And How to Forge puts a lot of information out there, a lot of tutorials. They're somewhat redundant, but they'll make like, say, how to install a LAMP server for Ubuntu, whatever version is out now. And that's really good because there are little small changes, but at the same time, you can kind of keep up on what's new and what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. Who just joined us? Is that Mr. Cherry?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yep, just listening on.
What's up, dude?
All right, I'm learning the discussion. I had to join on, say what's up.
Do you have anything you want to add to newbie brothers trying to get in, what they should know? certifications, anything in terms of sysadmin?
Well, I can talk mainly about Linux sysadmin, so not Windows per se. What Young Grizzly said earlier was spot on, but I prefer the Rails certifications, the Red Hat Enterprise ones. I had a couple of coworkers that went through them and did very well. I'm not familiar too much on how deep the Linux Plus ones go, or if because what's good about the Rail, it actually prepares you to use what we use, because we use a cluster of all Red Hat machines, and you get to you get used to the command line, you get used to using Yum, you get used to using systemd and managing services, stuff like that. So starting off, what I always tell people is just get rid of any Windows machines you have. So,
Christian, he's talking to you.
Yes. Format them all.
Yeah, just immerse yourself. I would also say try other distros. I think Anti-Gravity posted that he works on FreeBSD. You learn a lot. Oh, is you?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
That's cool.
You're a brave man for that one.
Because we at work we have HPUX system. So when you learn other flavors of the Unix or Linux distros, you just get a different, because they all, they're based on, they have different lineages of, one is based off AT&T derivative, BSDs are based off Berkeley. So you get you just get way better at it. Like I could put you in front of any machine and you'll know what to do. You wouldn't get lost. Oh, I'm on Red Hat. I don't know what to type. Or on Debian, oh, I'm lost. No, you just get used to it. Like there's certain commands that are, you can run on any of them.
May I ask what editor you use?
Vim.
All right. Okay. Glad you're on the panel, man. Appreciate it.
How long have you been in the field?
I started in 2003. So what, 16 years? Yeah, I started as a CCNA.
Started as a CCNA?
Yeah, that in 2003, networking was the hotness.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get a job, man. I was like, they wouldn't take me seriously. It was like, oh, you need a CCNP. Then I started studying for the CCNP. But at home, I had a bunch of Linux machines I was messing around with, and I had a friend that was like, yo, just you need to get into this Linux stuff, and PHP was the big thing back then. So I said, all right. So I started getting to doing rinky-dinky websites on PHP, and got into the whole Linux ecosystem, and yeah, man, just never looked back. But a funny thing about that editor question, I applied for a job in like 2008 for, I think it was sportsline.com, and the guy asked me what editor I used, and I said I used I forget, it was like some, I forgot, it was like Pico or something. He was like, no, we don't use Vim. Yeah. He's like, no, we need guys that use Vim. I said, oh, okay.
Yeah, so you use Pico?
Yeah, back then. And I haven't looked back. I switched to Vim, started learning all the intricate details, and haven't switched.
As long as it's not Pico and Ermax, man, you cool, man.
Damn Vim ninjas, man. I don't know. Like I can't keep up with Vim ninjas. That's what we call them, bro. If you know Vim and know it very well, like you could do some crazy stuff with Vim.
Yeah.
Pico, man.
Emacs too. I've seen some Emacs ninjas out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as the Linux Plus certification, the way I would, I guess, make an analogy to it or a comparison, if you will, or is something like that, would be Linux Plus is almost like Network Plus. So Network Plus is general, and then Cisco or your CCNA, CCNPs, or your CCNA, I should say, is more specific and a little bit more in depth, especially on the platform. I like the CCNA course or CCNA material a lot better. And then Linux Plus is more general, so it'll be a lot of things that are in the GNU library itself, or GNU class of programs. So you'll get like sed and grep and stuff like that, because those are mostly on all systems. or mostly all in all POSIX or POSIX compliant systems.
Yep.
So Red Hat is more specific, and then there's some other things in Red Hat that you just won't find in other places. But for the most part, if you learn the Red Hat, it's pretty much like learning the Linux Plus. You can easily, in a sense, step down to Linux Plus, and you'll still pass it nonetheless.
Well, I think it goes different. I think it goes the opposite way. I think if Linux Plus is a good prep for RHCSA, but you probably, if you're going to take RHCSA, you probably wouldn't take Linux Plus. If you don't have a need to take RHCSA, then Linux Plus does become the go-to. Now, keep in mind that LFCS is already out now. That's been out for a couple of years now. So everybody who hasn't taken the Linux Plus may want to look at Linux Foundation. So let me share my screen so that you guys understand what we're talking about here.
As I remember, when you get the Linux Plus and you do the 2 tests, you actually get the endorsement from the Linux Foundation as well, because they're pretty much 1-in-1. And you're totally right. So, for instance, I took my CCNA before I took Network Plus. I only took the Network Plus to brush up, and Network Plus was a breeze after you learn the CCNA. So I would imagine it's the same thing if you go for your Red Hat cert.
Give me 1 second. Bear with me. I don't have it here.
I'll look for it for you, Mike. Give me a few.
No, I have the Linux page up. I just didn't have the coupon to the July 4th certifications. Do you? I think I have that. That's not it either. Okay, I found it. That's not it. What is this? Okay, here we go right here. All right, here is Linux Foundation. So Linux Foundation is like the bedrock of everything Linux in the Linux community in terms of training, certification, and projects. So they're having a SysAdmin sale, which is one of the reasons why we had this hangout for Black Tech Talk. So it covers Linux System Admin Bundle. So what you get with that is the essentials of Linux system administration, the certification, as well as a bonus, Linux security fundamentals. I can't recommend this enough. I've taken the certification before, but it's very difficult. It's a performance-based certification, so I did fail it. And then it has Linux System Engineer Bundle, which is the next step up. You probably won't pass Linux System Engineer unless you pass SysAdmin first. If you can pass SysAdmin, you can probably pass Systems Engineer.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's marked down quite a bit. Typically, it's $4.99 for a bundle like that. But now they have it on sale for $3.25, and it's good. And you get one free retake. So if you fail it once, you don't have to pay for another exam. You can just take. You have a free retake, and I think you have to wait 30 days before you take the next. You schedule the next test. So I'm going to drop that in the chat for you guys because I think that it's very crucial for you to have it.
Oh, good stuff.
All right, let me get into the next stuff. And keep in mind, if you can pass this certification, you can do your job. This is performance-based. This isn't a Q&A exam. You don't get 10 points for putting your name on the your first and last name thrown it, right? You don't get that. You will brick a box, though. I can tell you that much. You will brick something if you're not too careful.
Not unless you know what you're doing.
They ask some very weird questions, man. I don't know who writes these questions at all. And it seems to be that way for all certifications. I don't care who writes the certification.
Yeah.
Yeah, true that. True that.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, this one is from CompTIA. This was sent via email the other day. What is the difference between IT security and cybersecurity? So somebody in the chat had asked this earlier. Some people seem to use the terms IT security, information security, and cybersecurity interchangeably, but I've also worked with people who have used the terms in specific ways. For example, some will say there is a larger concept of IT security, which involves physical security, information security, and cybersecurity, as shown in the figure below. But what is the difference in What is the difference in these terms, and why does it matter? If it even matters, keep reading to find out. What is IT security? The idea captured in the above image is that IT security has three categories. Physical security focuses on how you keep people and infrastructure safe. Focus on securing buildings, server rooms, and wiring closets. You focus on proper lighting for buildings and parking lots, for example. It also involves understanding how to use camera guards as well as actual guards and even guard dogs. So CISSP talks about the physical security aspect. So that's what they're referring to here. The next is information security, focuses on keeping all data and derived information safe. This includes physical data, paper, computers, as well as electronic information. In this category, individuals focus on data backups as well as monitoring techniques to make sure that no one has tampered with data or exfiltrated information. This category focuses less on the actual equipment and computing resources, because it focuses on data itself. And yes, I'm distinguishing between data and information. Data is raw and unprocessed. Information is derived from data after quite a bit of scrubbing. Cybersecurity focuses on protecting electronic assets, including internet, WAN, and LAN resources used to store and transmit that information. Cybersecurity tends to focus on how malicious actors use these resources to attack information. Those individuals interested in cybersecurity are the ones interested in making sure that hackers can't use electronic means to gain proper access to data and information. This is actually a very accurate description of what cybersecurity is. A lot of people just throw the term cybersecurity around and don't really understand that they're misusing the term to make a point. So which is it? So which is best? Who is right? There's really no definitive discussion. But when IT pros go to create a security plan, they tend to separate out the physical information and cybersecurity categories. Sometimes they don't even seem to realize it. Does the terminology really matter? Many times the question arises when IT pros are discussing what certification or training program is best and or most appropriate for their security role. Other times it's when individuals are trying to organize their security teams and activities appropriately. I find that unless you're implementing a security plan in a very specific way, the terminology really doesn't matter. Implementing security is all about the details and using your terms consistently. So as long as you focus on the details and start applying security controls according to a common sense, policy-based approach, I don't think you can go wrong with your terminology as long as it's consistent. So I do have a pet peeve about people using the term security. They say, well, I want to get into cybersecurity. I want to get into information security, you know, and they kind of just throwing around these terms. And I understand it's out of ignorance sometimes. But my perspective is that the government says otherwise sometimes. They are pretty, they're pretty upfront about what cybersecurity is and what information security is. And the CISSP has thrown the term cybersecurity and information security around interchangeably, mostly because it's a pretty old certification, but it keeps getting updated. But the backdrop of it and the face of it doesn't really differentiate itself between cyber and information security. So sometimes you may see a role come up and it says information security analyst, and then you'll see another role show up that says cybersecurity analyst, and people just think that they're one and the same, that the responsibilities are one and the same, and they're really not. It's just the title. The titles get confusing because people don't really know the proper background behind it. I've been in information security and I've been a cybersecurity person as well. But the roles and responsibility have been almost 4 out of 5 the same. Why they loosely throw these terms around, I have no idea. HR is a mother. So, any of you guys have anything you want to add to this?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you describe the difference between the two in terms of what you would have to do on your day-to-day in your experience?
Information security, from my experience, has more to do with compliance and risk. That's very soft-skilled and doesn't really apply to what we're going to talk about, which is cybersecurity. So I do cybersecurity, which is exactly what the article pointed out. I focus on the electronic side of defense. So I'm a blue team guy for the most part. I can do red team work, but I just don't have the need to because we don't have a red team to begin with. So my blue team or cybersecurity roles and responsibilities is basically security operations, implementation, architectural reviews, risk assessments, vendor assessments, and then you have some menial work that's involved too, but that's kind of miscellaneous, such as writing PowerShell scripts and stuff like that to kind of collect assets to see what's, whether or not you have something like an agent, like a antivirus agent that has failed, intrusion detection, all of the things that are, all of the defensive technologies that are implemented within the organization is what I leverage and manage on a day-to-day basis to protect the organization and its assets.
Follow-up question. What would be your demarcation point in terms of where you would hand your work over to an information security personnel in your company, if any at all? Like, where do you stop and where do you start?
Policy. Okay. So if there's a policy that needs to be reviewed, we may have to both sit down and look at this type of stuff. So verbiage matters. Also technical writers come into play in this as well, because they tend to write better than everybody else. So for that very reason, but information security policy guys, or policy people, I should say, may write a draft, and then we'll look at it as cybersecurity and say, okay, well, let's hand it back off, and then somebody else has to sign off on it, like a chief compliance officer or director of security.
Thank you.
Keep it techie. You have anything you want to add to this in terms of like the differentiations of IT security, cybersecurity, security in general? Anybody have anything you want to add to this?
One, I just want to agree with you that, yeah, HR is a mother. That just go ahead and add any type of hip term to any position. I have a question for you, Mike, or anybody who does this. If someone's starting out in IT, what would be the best way for them to learn how to document correctly?
Document what exactly, though?
Anything like, let's say, okay, this video card was busted. I tested out by doing this, verified that this is broken. Like the steps and procedures of everything that they did and how to document it correctly. So just in case, hypothetically, if they had to hand the work off to somebody else.
What's the best way to go about it?
Right. Because like new guys, when they get into the IT field, their documentations, for the most part, is crap. And then it's like, okay, I got to take you off to the side, dude. Here's how I do it. And then somebody else will come in like, well, here's how I do it. There's
no standard. It's all about what's comfortable for each and every individual. But if you use ServiceNow basically forces you to write things in detail, right? So in regards to your example, I probably wouldn't understand that, but from a security standpoint, so from a cybersecurity standpoint, I need as much detail as possible, including time and date, and I need logs. Logs are very important. If I don't see logs, I can't do anything with it. You can tell me what you thought had happened, or what had happened was, Negro excuses, right?
Yeah.
You could tell me that till you're blue in the face, and it's not going to mean anything if I have no logs. Logs are evidence. So being able to articulate exactly what transpired and adding the logs in and getting screenshots makes a difference in how we complete an investigation from start to finish. Because if we don't have the logs and we have nothing, we have no evidence to refer to, and therefore we have a hypothetical of what really happened. If we have screenshots, then that actually helps in terms of capturing what an error was, right? So, for example, we had a few of our domain controllers go down this weekend because an agent failed, right? A Carbon Black agent failed. So Carbon Black needs to update itself. It tries to, someone pushed an update to a Carbon Black agent, and the agent brought down the kernel, which brought down the whole entire domain controller. Now, we don't have logs for that because we weren't collecting logs on it. We had no idea that they were going to do that. However, in the event logs for Windows Server, we were able to capture that log and actually get a screenshot of it and then send it back to those guys and say, hey, we know something screwed up. What did you guys do? And here's what we're seeing. They go back and then they look at their their network analyst or whoever pushed the update out, and now we have a conversation. What should happen typically is there should be a change ticket opened to notify everybody in the organization who's involved in IT that there's going to be an update going out to certain agents on certain servers, and this is what time it's going to happen. That should never happen during business hours. critical update should only happen between Monday and Thursday. It should never happen on a Friday. It should never happen on a Saturday because nobody's there to actually intervene. So having proper documentation that articulates exactly the steps of what happened from start to finish, it means a big difference, at least to us.
Okay.
Where I've ran into documentation being an issue is, as a consultant working with a team, if you don't have the proper documentation and you're AFK or out of pocket or what have you, and you're not there, that can hold up an entire process. And so as far as like, teaching people proper documentation, I think what you said as a response is usually the first thing you do, which is, pull them aside and say, hey, listen, this is what it should look like. Or you wait for them to mess up. And then you say, okay, these are the corrections you can make. And this is how the ticket should look. Or this is how your documentation should look. So for instance, I use Confluence by Atlassian, and I have a template. Yeah, I love Confluence. But I have a template for network information. So all I have to do is add the title at the top and then fill in all the boxes for all that template, or for that whole entire template. So network gateway information, DHCP, WAP information, or anything else, So that's kind of a big thing, and that goes into policies, having procedures and policies in place to make it a lot easier when you're onboarding somebody to your team.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've learned over the years is that creating a big wiki internally as to what it is that of the assets that you have. So you have firewalls, you have IDSs, you have antivirus agents, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I've learned when I worked at Dell was that they have what they call mini wikis. I think that's what they call mini wikis or something like that. Basically, mini wikis get updated frequently. So each mini wiki applies to each asset. So if you have a Cisco ASA firewall, well, guess what? There's a mini wiki that goes to that, and you need to keep that updated so that each firmware revision that you add to it, each change that is made to it, gets added to that mini wiki, and for the team as well. So that's updated maybe every 7 to 10 days, depending on what kind of activity has happened to it. But the total big wiki, this holds everything in it. But like you said, a Confluence is exactly what I'm referring to. But I think there's ways to create that type of stuff on your own. I'm a Notepad++ type of guy. So I dump everything into Notepad++, from logs to regex, and to just doing tickets. Like I never put anything into a ticket unless I write it inside Notepad++. Only then will I copy it then into Notepad. Will I copy it into the ticket? I never just write everything inside of a ticket.
Me too.
I like Notepad++ as well, and for me, since I move around a lot, I like Google Keep, or keep.google.com. And that's always a good service because then it syncs with all my different devices, and I can make lists, even grocery lists, and then also tag them with labels, which is really nice.
I use that, and I use OneNote too, but yeah, most of the stuff at my job is Notepad++.
Yeah, because OneNote is good for note taking because Google has something called Google has an equivalent called Keep. Google Keep, that's equivalent of that. Evernote is actually pretty good too. But Notepad++ is really good for coding. So if you're going to take all types of code, it's going to keep the structure of the code intact so that it's not messed up. And you can write all your code in there, and then there's plugins that work with Notepad++ that allows you to extract out.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about Notepad++ is, as you said, the plugins, but keeping those line breaks when you're on a Windows platform and you're transferring from, like, the Linux line breaks and things like that. Small things like that really help, having tools that can do that instead of, not respecting those proper line breaks. And you'll see that a lot when you're coding. If you have to go between different systems, Linux to Windows, and so on and so forth.
Reno, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, on the cyber security, I work for a company that deals with the airlines, and if you know the airline systems, it mirrors the banking system. I mean, we just got off TPS.
Hmm.
We've been on a mainframe. I mean, like the last 2 years, we've been all Linux. So a lot of the processes that they're adding in now are like we used to just be able to SSH anywhere, but within the last 3 months, now they're enforcing two-factor authentication in the office. So now I have to carry this RSA key with me all over the place.
Yep.
So it's I don't know if it's with that new European policy because we also have to be PCI DSS compliant
Yep.
because we take credit cards,
Hmm.
but they've been locking things down even for us working here. So yeah, so after reading that little paragraph there, I guess that's what cybersecurity is all about. And another thing they started doing, they hired some pen testers, something we never had. So we host some Apache services internally, and they're actually, hitting our servers internally, looking for like common PHP exploits. And you can see in the logs all these like, regular expressions that are looking for like, like admin, like, weak passwords for in our MySQL instances and all that. And they're finding vulnerabilities and opening tickets and telling us, okay, we got to close this, we got to close that, we got to close this. And yeah, I mean, I've been there 10 years, and this is within the last 2 years they've been doing this.
Yeah, because there's a lot of vulnerabilities in point of sales operating systems if you're taking credit cards, right?
Yep.
So what's happening here is a lot of organizations, probably like the one you work at, have credit card data, critical data that is being unmasked and is passing through all of these endpoints. And what happens here is PCI DSS standards say that if you are handling credit card data, this stuff has to be masked and encrypted from end to end. If you fail to do this, you are out of compliance and you are in some deep shit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're always telling us. Yeah, we had to patch before the last audit, so I had to patch like 40 different servers because we were running on Apache 2.4. I mean, the Apache versions we were using were like really old,
Hmm.
and we upgraded to 2.6, one of the latest
If
versions.
it works and it's just fine, then to you guys, there's no problem. But to audit and compliance and to the pen tester, they're saying you guys are screwed up over here.
Yeah.
And now what happens here is you have to schedule out time to patch. You have to test the patch, schedule out time for the patch, and then you have to reboot then you have to do the implementation, and then you have to reboot, and then you have to validate whether or not this actually went through. And if it doesn't go through, that's downtime. You have to schedule this stuff out. This requires more human capital and resources than what most people really understand, which is why we tell you guys to get step your game up, man, because this is where when they start hiring more people, they're going to bring one of you guys on as a junior admin, and then you're going to help back up some guy like Reynolds Cherry, sorry.
One thing I'd like to add, what I've seen as a person in the data center is using like one system to get on the rest of our systems. So we call them jump stations.
Yep.
And you would just log into your jump station and then go from there. And then that jump station is audited all to hell, like in all the logs. It pushes everything out through our syslog or whatever logging daemon that you may use if you use a Logstash, which is a part of the Elk stack, or Logzilla. There's a ton of them out there. But that's one thing they use for security, where it's just like, okay, you have that single point of entry, and that's another thing. Just closing down your threat vector, I guess you would say.
Yeah. With this implementation of the two-factor auth for us, we got to go through what we call it a jump server.
That's what we call it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we call it jump server. So we got to go through we can't get to anything without going through the jump server first.
And if the endpoint that you're connecting to stops communicating with the jump server, then the jump server should be have an automated script that says this device has been down or not communicating for the last 90 seconds.
It will kick us off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it should show up in your dashboard. Yeah, it should show up in your dashboard that something's not working here because one of the devices are not connecting to it.
Yeah, but what's cool is if you're a Linux person and you're on the command line a lot, you got to get used to running a command called tmux or screen, which will, if you run it, you can keep your sessions alive, even if you get disconnected, blah, blah, you don't lose your history, or you don't lose your connected sessions. It has windows and all that. It's basically like tabbing, like having a browser with tabs for your terminal sessions. It's really cool. So
yeah,
that's what
I use Screen for my development environment. So when I move from computer to computer, it's great. And then also if you're doing long file transfers, it's good too, because if you kill a session, you're screwed.
Yep.
And you have to start that whole thing over again.
Yeah. What was I going to say? That if you got, it's one thing if Reynolds is doing 40 servers, that might be one thing. He can kind of schedule that out depending on what the priority is. But what happens when you have 20,000 AWS instances and other physical servers in your closet or in your data center? 20,000 servers means that's 19 days of rebooting for a kernel patch.
That's where your Puppet and Chef and other orchestration tools start to come in.
Right. I'm saying once you do the patching, you have to reboot. It takes it's going to take 19 days to reboot all those systems.
Yep.
They don't reboot immediately. They have to go through a battery of tests before they even come up. So, these are some of the complications of being a sysadmin and working on SecOps, because there's so many moving pieces involved in your basic operations that people don't take this stuff into consideration. Even just one firewall, I had to update in firewall. So you have an active and a passive. Well, because the passive is there in case of a failover. So you update the passive first, so that you don't take down the active first. Update the passive. Guess what? The passive doesn't come back up. That's good because now we know not to update the active firewall at all. That stays online, and therefore we can take some time to worry about what's happening with the passive. So that's happened several times to me in the past. I can't stand Cisco products personally, but to each his own.
Well, yeah, and that's why you have the thing like the Dev Test Network or something like that, or the Mirror Network, if you can afford to have that. Especially if it's a virtualization has made that a little bit easier if you're able to virtualize your firewalls.
Mm-hmm. Where's Gabe at, man? He should be on this panel. He's not here tonight.
Yeah, he totally needs to be here.
Yeah, he was on earlier though. I think he's traveling, so. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from Krebs. QuickBooks cloud hosting firm InSync hidden ransomware attack. Just really small text. Cloud hosting provider InSync says it is trying to recover from a ransomware attack that shut down its network and has left customers unable to access their accounting data for the past 3 days. Unfortunately for InSync, the company appears to be turning a deaf ear to the increasingly anxious cries from its users for more information about the incident. InSync experienced a ransomware attack on 7/16/19, perpetuated by unknown malicious attackers. The attack impacted data belonging to certain InSync clients, rendering such data inaccessible. As soon as InSync discovered the attack, InSync took steps to contain it. This included turning off some servers in the InSync environment. InSync continues to engage cybersecurity experts for assistance and are working quickly to restore access to all impacted data and determine whether impacted data was accessed without authorization. At this time, we have no evidence of such success. So Insync specializes in providing cloud-based QuickBooks accounting software and services. In a statement posted to its status page, Insync said it experienced a ransomware attack on July 16 and took it offline in a bid to contain the spread of the malware. The attack impacted data belonging to certain Insync clients, rendering such data inaccessible, the company said. As soon as Insync discovered the attack, Insync took steps to contain it. This included turning off some servers in the Insync environment. Insync said it had engaged outside cybersecurity assistance to determine whether any customer data was accessed without authorization, but that so far it has no estimate for when those files might be available again to customers. Meanwhile, Insync's customers, many of them accountants who manage financial data for a number of their own clients, have taken to Twitter to vent their frustration over a lack of updates since the initial message to users. In response, the company appears to have simply deleted or deactivated its Twitter account. A cache copy from June 2019 is available here. Several customers venting about outage on Twitter also accused the company of unpublishing negative comments about the incident from its Facebook page. This is I don't want to read too much more because it's depressing, but
that's why you gotta have Azure nowadays if you're doing that.
Yeah, it's depressing because what's happening here is that a company like this should never have had an incident like this happen to them. From a security standpoint, their data should not have been in one central location to begin with. It should have been it should have had high availability, which is a part of the CIA, right? So confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Had they been following these principles, they wouldn't be worried so much about data, about a ransomware attack, because they should have had a warm site set up somewhere else, whether it's in the cloud or it's at some local on-prem site data center, and they should have had the ability to shift operations over to that warm site and then not only shut down that, their primary site, but actually do a proper investigation from a security standpoint, from an incident response standpoint. According to this, it doesn't look like they had any sort of security in place at all, and they're dealing with financial records. This is part of the stress that cybersecurity people have to go through, especially if you're a CISO or a CIO. You have to deal with this. You can't just turn off your Twitter and stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and think that it's going to go away.
Or if you're the consultant, you have to deal with this. This is
well, you may be able to opt out of that. I mean, you might be able to go home and still have a life. But for these guys, you know, this can destroy their career, because how did something like this happen? How can you have critical data being easily accessed by bad guys looking for this type of stuff and not have a response by turning off Twitter and turning off their social media page? Unrealistic.
Well, a lot of these companies, as I know it, there's a customer of mine that uses, I think it's like Bright Networks or something like that. Mm-hmm. But essentially, all they are, or all these hosted QuickBooks server companies are just companies that have a terminal server, mm-hmm. and they allow you to log in, and then anybody can log in. Because I've had it to where I've had to call this company, and they knew the customer's password. I'm like,
wow.
What? I was like, you knew, like, because I had to call the company to get them hooked up again and to get the whole remote desktop session going again. And they actually knew the customer's password. And I was like, oh no, that's, oh no. Like, I don't even like knowing my customer's QuickBooks passwords, but they know the actual terminal server password. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Or I had to give it to them in a sense. Actually, yeah, I think I had to give it to them even. And they actually put it in. So I was like, on both accounts, I was like, yeah, that's BS. That's crazy. But what you really should do, and somebody's asking about this in Azure, but with my experience with Azure, even if you have, for instance, SQL hosted via Azure or on the Azure platform, you can actually roll back down to the minute almost down to the second of, you know, whatever you want. So if I wanted to roll back to 8:01:31 this morning, I can do so in the Azure platform. And with the Azure platform, you can actually have constant running snapshots on your server. So something like that should be there, along with data security. So I've seen it where you have backups every 15 minutes, an hour of the data, and it takes little snapshots, incremental snapshots, and go, and then you can have that, and then revert back to it. It's just like all that stuff is available.
Yeah. Well, I'm in South Florida, so we just had like last month some municipality up north, Riviera Beach. I mean, they just paid a $600,000 ransom.
Yeah, I remember that
Bitcoin, on Bitcoin. Just I mean, they got the key to unencrypt, so that was nice of the guys, but they had no backups. Made no sense.
Yeah, I heard about that too. I'm in South Florida as well, and it's like I hear this and I'm like, holy crap, are you serious? Like, it's like, all right, but I know how it is sometimes, even with companies. Sometimes they don't want to spend the money on it, and they don't think it's a big issue, or it'll never happen to me. And I've had new startups I'm talking to recently, and I start telling them the security implications, and I said, hey, what's your compliance? And they think they have no compliance that they have to adhere to, and I'm like, no, you have to understand whatever your customers' compliance needs are, it's yours as well. Because when they go through an audit, your customer might say, are you SOC compliant? Are you this industry's standard compliance? Are you that? And if you're not, they're not going to use you.
They can't because it goes against their it goes against vendor risk management assessment. So
right, and their insurance company, if they have one for their industry, might not even actually. They'll say you cannot use that vendor. It won't insure you for it.
Yeah, so that's where cybersecurity comes in, or I should say information security. But security in general comes in. I really don't like the different terms, but information security is key here. So I know people had asked earlier about Security Plus. Yeah, Security Plus is like a that's like a base hit, for cyber in terms of tech security, IT security. So you should have a Security Plus at bare minimum to even have these conversations in the workplace. I know some organizations won't even hire you unless you have your Security Plus. So won't even have a conversation with you for an interview. So, but these are the trials and tribulations of why you see a lot of security openings being posted, because situations like this with ransomware, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. I've never been in a situation where we had ransomware, but I understand what goes into it, and I have seen tabletop exercises that demonstrate how impactful this would be on your organization. And I don't even know what to say. It's like walking in the house with doo-doo on your boot or your shoe or something like that, man. And you're like, what is that smell? You're like, man, you didn't wipe your feet at the door, leave your shoes off at the door, man. It's a disaster.
I mean, what I don't understand is a lot of these ransomwares. It's like a secretary will run it. Okay, I get it. A secretary runs it. His or her laptop or computer gets encrypted. What I don't understand is, how does that person have access, like to other drives?
I looked at some of the research, like some of the research papers on it, and it was they were using an exploit, a SMB exploit on Windows systems.
Okay.
And that'll allow it to get out through the network. Well, you understand that, but yeah, that'll allow it to get out to other computers and on the network. And yeah, I just wanted to add to it too as well. Yeah, ransomware is bad for your company, man, if that happens. Because a lot of times those guys don't even give you the keys to actually decrypt your stuff. So like that guy the people you said in Florida or somewhere, they paid and they got the key back. Well, that's rare, because a lot of times they don't even get the key, but decryption key to fix that. So yeah, it's all bad.
You know, one of the things that is happening though is that they're getting crafty. So they're saying, you know, they punt this sort of prompt to you that says you have ransom. This is crypto locker and ransomware. You know, you're not going to get your data back unless you pay us this much in Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In reality, the data is not being it's not been crypto locked at all. So they're fooling a lot of these organizations and a lot of these people to thinking that they have their data hijacked and kidnapped. In reality, it's not happening. Now, I'm not saying this is happening 100% of the time, but I would say 1 out of 3 times this is happening where companies are forking over lots of money for data that hasn't even been captured. So if you are an organization that has BitLocker or some other form of SEP, which is semantic endpoint encryption, right? SEE. If you have some form of level of AES 256-bit encryption on your data, this probably shouldn't happen. For the most part, this should never happen unless the data that you have is unsecured to begin with. And if it is unsecured data and it's a financial critical data, you have a lot more issues in losing than the data itself being ransomware attacked, because before the ransomware attack even happened, the data was never secure. So you've already broke regulatory standards and guidelines.
Yeah, like, I mean, open MongoDB servers where they're dumping, where they have literally, you know, all types of information about, you know, citizens, customer base. I think there was a couple that were found in India and I believe in China where they were just open MongoDB servers, and it was a crap ton of just JSON objects that were people's entire lives. Like it was like crazy the amount of records that were found. So
there's all types of failures in security here, and SysAdmin work too, but security failed to do an audit. Who did the audit on the system? Who signed off on it? When was the last audit that even happened? Where's your DLP solution? Data loss prevention. Somebody had to have implemented this at some point. If you're going to be an organization, that's one of the several areas of things that have to be implemented in order to be compliant. Encryption. What level of encryption was used? What kind of encryption was used? Where was your intrusion protection, IPS? Where was your intrusion detection? How did they get past all of these levels of devices that you use to protect your organization? What was your patching looking like on your Windows machines, on your Linux machines? When was the last time you patched? What patches were installed? When were they scheduled out? What was the change management? There's a whole lot of questions that need to be answered. If you're a CISO, you're screwed. I think there's been discussion happening about arresting some of these people who failed to secure the data or at the top. If you're a CISO, you can't just quit your job and go to Jamaica or something like that and hang on Kingston. It doesn't work that way. You have to be. You're ultimately responsible for the organization's security posture. So you can't just blame some help desk guy, because they had a bad password or something like that. Somebody should have been monitoring all of the password management and life cycle behind that. Instead of the 90-day turnaround that everybody uses typically, maybe we should turn it down to 45 days. Got to implement MFA, multi-factor authentication. There's a whole litany of things that should have taken place prior to the ransomware happening that did not happen in the beginning. And some of these people are walking away, what do you call it? Their pensions and their severance packages. And it's like, no, you go back and go finish your job. There's some data that needs to be found. Now, there's a difference between data loss versus ransomware attack. Ransomware attack says that the data is there, but is locked away, allegedly is locked away, and you just don't have access to it. Now, there's a variety of ways that you can get around that. Now, data loss means that that data was exfilled out of your network, and it was critical data and PII that is lost here, and you have no control over that. It has now exited your boundaries of your network. If you're HIPAA compliant, if you're a healthcare organization, this is a disaster. You're out of business now at this point. In places like Massachusetts that has data laws, MDPR, which is the Massachusetts Data Protection Regulation, says that if you, for every record you lose, that's $50,000 to $50,000 per record. If you lose 100 million records, you are screwed. You are out of business. There is no coming back from that.
Right. Wow. The biggest thing to me is just like, the most they should have lost is maybe a day's worth of transaction logs for their customers, the most. And in some companies, even that is way too much, but at least, they can have the ledger or something like that they can go back on and say, hey, put in the most recent receipts. But from what it sounds like, they have nothing else as a secondary way of getting this back up. Because if I was to design their network or design this whole system for them, I'd have possibly continuous backups going on, or one master backup that's happening at the end of the day or something like that. And then any data from that last backup should be lost, right? Mm-hmm. And that's at the very least. But essentially, you should have continuously running snapshots or incremental snapshots. And the only reason they would shut things down is to patch everything and spin up new instances of the old data from the snapshot, and then say, okay, we want to patch everything, run penetration testing against this before we open it back up. And then you still have all the old stuff that you can actually dissect and see where they got in and start doing any tracking or something like that. And that's where, virtual machines or having a virtualized infrastructure is key or very important.
So now you're talking about nation state attacks, right? Nation state attack says like you said, VMs. Well, guess what? VM escape. So you have VM vulnerabilities. Bad guys, nation states are looking for all of these endpoints that you're talking about. They pop your box, and now you're screwed. Because once they're in, they're not leaving. They're not leaving until they get what they want, and they work in teams. You're talking about maybe 5 guys bare minimum. They jump in and out. First guy pops the box. Second guy walks in.
Right. Second
guy looks for the data. Third guy comes in, captures data. Fourth guy lifts the data out. Fifth guy is at the endpoint waiting to secure that data. So they're working in teams. They're not waiting around. To discover whether or not you have patched areas or anything like that. They're looking for all the vulnerabilities, and they've probably been sitting around for 6 months, watching your boxes, watching your life cycle development on whether or not you've patched up. This is how Equifax was breached. They had Apache struts issue that was not patched, and that was how the bad guys got in. And plus they were using weak passwords. Their password was password. Just like the combination to my luggage. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 was the combination to the luggage, and that's how they got in.
Dang.
Like even Pinterest has things that'll if you log into Pinterest and it happened to me, they were like, oh, we see that your password is public, and we found it somewhere else, meaning that somebody else got hacked that has the same password, and I wasn't using different passwords because it's like Pinterest. I don't care. But it's like all that information they found on the internet, compared it to their database, and they said, oh, this guy has the same password in 2 different places with the same credentials and everything. And I'm like, wow, Pinterest is doing this. But, Equifax gets hacked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just had a cross-site scripting vulnerability that it didn't lead to any data loss, but it had to be patched. That was found internally by these same guys they just hired. That's amazing, all these years, and it's within the last 2 years that they're really getting serious about security. where I work.
Oh, you have to. You have to. If any of these states, whether it's Massachusetts, California, New York, New Jersey, if they find out you're unpatched and you lost data, you are in some deep doo doo. Same thing with the other countries now too. The European Union, for that matter, with GDPR. Look at some of their, some of the chapters within the regulation itself. Stipulates a lot of these things as well, and the fines are very steep. We saw Facebook had to pay $5 billion,
Mm-hmm.
for their data loss. So if you're a small company, that means you're out of business. And if you are a CISO, then that means you also are permanently out of business as well. The Equifax CISO, or CSO, wherever she was, I think she had a background, a degree in music or something like that. She probably can't find a job, going forward. Maybe she can be a consultant or write a book or something like that. But these now once your organization has been breached, you're now a case study at most major universities, and no one wants to be in that position where they have to go home and explain to their loved ones that I can't find a job anymore. Maybe I can be a Lyft or Uber driver, but for all intents and purposes, cybersecurity is out of your reach. So, Anti-Gravity asked a question: what about the hacks on Experian that took personal data of 120 million Americans? That's basically the entire working age population of the entire United States. Yeah, I think we talked about that with Equifax. And maybe that might be what you're referring to. But yeah, they took 43 million records.
Also, another vector of attack nowadays is your phones. And I'm sure, I think they've actually said this on like the Money Watch or what have you, and they're talking about how Verizon and some of these mobile companies have to do more to protect their customers against scam calls. And I'm getting a lot more, and I use an app called what it's called, Who's Calling or something like that. But it's a community-based scam or number blocker. So you can rate a number negative or not or what have you, and then everybody in the community or the area gets it. So if they can automatically block something that you rated as bad or negative, which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. See, the ISP should actually be responsible for that. If the ISP, the service provider should be responsible for that, because if I have a number provided by my provider, and they should be monitoring these incoming calls, not your actual conversation, but who's dialing, right? So if I flag a call as being a spam call, that should actually go right back to the service provider, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, whoever it is. They should block that number from all organizations, or not all organizations, but all other providers too. They need to all work in sync to keep these numbers from being repopulated back into the pool of available numbers that could be used. Because what's happening here is these Indian scammers are actually using those numbers to actually call legitimate numbers, right? And you don't know if the call is legitimate or not, because it has a local number, and because of that, it makes it difficult to understand whether or not this is legitimate. And what happens when you answer the phone, it may just be recording your voice. You say hello, and then it has that hello recorded. So now they can actually use that to authenticate into different systems as well, if it is a voice recording. It's a pain in the balls, but that's the extent of it.
T-Mobile's definitely doing it. It used to be, I think, a service that you had to pay for, but now it's pretty standard, and I'll get blocks that way. The app I was talking about is Should I Answer, which is really nice, and it has like but it does exactly what you're talking about, Mike. So you can rate something personally and never get it, or you can actually rate something to where it pushes out to the community, and then others can block that number. So I've had up to like 2,000 calls blocked in the matter of three months or so.
Wow.
It's really good.
All right, let me get to this next article from Wired. Security news this week: browser extensions scraped data from millions of people. Slack passwords and NSO spyware and more top security news. Europeans had to navigate the stars this week. Well, GPS, but still after the continent's Burgoyne Galileo satellite navigation network went dark for a full 7 days. The incident is a warning for everyone of how fallible the infrastructure of our modern lives really is. In more other news, security researchers made an app designed to kill to prove a point about the intense risk of internet connect health devices and the need for the companies who make them to stop ignoring them. We explain how to clear out your zombie apps and online accounts and why Microsoft's very serious Blue Keep bug hasn't wreaked havoc on Windows devices of the world yet. Oh, and we, like everyone else, took note of this week's viral app, Face App, which shows you how you'll look when you're old. Though people were quick to point out its security risk, we reminded you that if you're worried about Face App, you're going to panic when you learn about little old app called Facebook. But that's not all. Every Saturday, we round up the security and privacy stories that we didn't break or report on in depth, but which we think you should know about nonetheless. Click on the headlines to read them and stay safe out there. If you use web browser or browser extensions, you're going to want to pay attention to this one. Our technical reporter Dan Gooden brings the news of a major news privacy failure recently unearthed by security researchers. Widely used Chrome and Firefox browser extensions scraped and sold the data of more than 4.1 million people until the researcher alerted Google and Mozilla. These extensions took the URL and other details from your browsing history and sold them to a data firm called Nacho Analytics, which marketed itself as providing a God mode for the internet. Nacho Analytics then published them for a fee. Because of the way many of the pages were protected, or rather not protected, those published links often allowed people to see the content of the page themselves. Among the sensitive pieces of information spilled, tax returns, doctor-patient communications, and links to Nest cameras. The scariest thing about data spy is that it likely represents a small fraction of the extensions out there that invade your privacy. As Gooden found when he dug into the research, many of these extensions in Nacho Analytics reference this spying and selling in the fine print of their terms of service. So what can you do to protect yourself? First, read the whole our story to see if you were caught up in the data spy, and second, read the fine print before installing any extensions. An Israeli spyware company popular with intelligence agencies across the world and famous for exploiting WhatsApp with just a phone call has a new sales pitch. Citing unnamed sources, the Financial Times reports that NSO Group is now telling governments and potential customers that its spyware can access personal data from the servers of all big tech companies. The important thing to know, though, is that it apparently claims to do so by compromising your device's authentication tokens. In other words, they haven't hacked the cloud, but the smartphones and computers of people who access it. Bottom line, as always, if a nation state targets you, you are toast. I talked about that earlier with Young Grizzly's example about VMware. If they want you, they will come and get you. There is no turning back from that. Those guys are persistent. It's what we call an APT, advanced persistent threats. They are coming and they're not leaving until they get what they want out of you.
Hey, isn't that why these let's say these people who are involved in terrorist groups and so forth, who are real threats, they don't even use phones. They don't even use them. They don't even use cell phones.
Well, they use phones, but they use burnout phones too.
Yeah, they use burnout phones, and then I understood that, how they got around one. I think they monitor it more now, but how they actually were able to communicate and get around some of the how would I say spying on them or eavesdropping, was they went to PlayStation 2 or something. They were talking on PlayStation 2 or a game or something like that.
Oh yeah,
And they were able to hide that way as well, which I'm sure they can't do now, but they were doing that, and our systems weren't able to pick that up, which I thought was pretty ingenious. But I think these guys probably have a better idea how to get around all the stuff that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Nokia is one of the biggest sellers still in Afghanistan as far as phones.
Yeah, yeah, because the networks are,
Yep.
dumb phones are actually pretty popular in
Yep.
Central Asia and Africa. So, what they do also, to your point, Nagone, what they also do is that they leap to different phones. So like Young Grizzly was talking about this earlier, that these spam calls. Well, guess what? If they collect all of these phone numbers from a database, what they can do is they can forward their initial calls to your phone number and then make the call that way.
Okay.
And they can spoof the number as well, so it can show up as something else.
Yep.
Which is really easy to do, especially if you work with phone systems. Another thing is they'll have their own private chat servers, like you guys are talking about, or even in video games. And also, a lot of times when you see a lot of these phone servers get hacked, which happens quite a bit, they're using them not only to make illegal calls, but to also do whatever they want on these phone servers. So if they get into a phone server and they get an extension, they just start to communicate through that phone server, and then go from there. So that's one thing that's happened before too.
So yeah, I was wondering because sometimes I get these marketing calls on my phone, and nobody answers, and I don't even say anything because I don't go hello. I don't even say anything. I used to do that. I stopped, so I don't even say anything. I just wait, and then I see the phone. It'll be on, and then it'll just go off. It'll go doot doot doot, and just go off. So
because they're using your phone number to make long distance calls. So what happens here is they pivot off your number, and that allows them to get to another place that they're trying to call to for free.
Am I getting charged for this?
You could very well be charged for it if you don't check your bill at the end of the month.
This has happened to me quite a bit, and the same thing happens. What I've seen done more often than not is if you don't say anything, then there's an automated system on the other end listening to see if somebody says something, and then it'll play an automated recording. That happens quite a bit too.
Okay, so technically, so if that is the case, so basically, I shouldn't even answer the phone then if I see these really strange, weird numbers come up. Don't even answer the phone.
Yeah, Apple has a feature on their iPhones that allows you to identify if the number is suspicious or not, and you can report it, and Apple would actually block it. How they go about it, I don't really know in particular, but they seem to have figured it out on iPhones.
Okay.
Yeah, it's best to not answer, like you said, because they can use your voice to agree to certain things as well. Like if somebody say, is this I'm gonna use me as an example, is this Josh? And your response is yes, this is Josh. Well, yes, they got a recording of you saying yes, and they can use that to any question that they want to. Yeah.
And so it's somebody that's using my phone to make other calls.
They could. Yep, that's exactly what happens for the most part. That's what they're doing. So especially if they can get your call logs off of your phone, if they access your contact list through an app like Candy Crush or something like that, because those apps collect data off your phone. They usually scrape data off your phone. So your phone logs, your contact list is what they're looking for, and then they could actually call, a previous person, like call Mike V or something like that. And next thing you know, they're using your voice to say, "Yo, Mike V." And it's, I'm thinking it's you, and I'm having a conversation, but they're recording everything that's happening in the background. That's a nation state attack. They're coming after you. So,
who's doing this specifically?
Who's doing this? I can't tell you that, brother. I'll end up in the Hudson River or something like that. I don't want to tell you that, but what I will say is that there are bad guys out there who get hired by nation states to actually do this. We saw this with Saudi Arabia last month or a couple months ago, who went to Pakistan or India looking for malware to affect infrastructure. So they're looking to attack, maybe Kuwait, maybe Qatar, maybe Iran, maybe Japan, maybe Germany. Everyone's looking for weapons of mass destructions on USB thumb drives. So that's the extent of how this is working. Could be anybody doing this.
Very interesting.
Even
I know a lot of people who get a lot of marketing or dumb calls and this kind of stuff, and I'm always suspicious. That's why I don't even answer them. I cut a lot of them down, but I've gotten a few. Like I'll get like a couple of these calls a week, two or three of them, at least.
Yeah, it's to the point. I know people who, even me. Well, I don't even pick up most of the time, and like my phone will say "scam likely" now. A lot of times. I communicate mostly via, because everybody's on WhatsApp, so I have no choice. I prefer Signal or Telegram, but no one is on it that I know of. So yeah, either via WhatsApp or very rarely do people call me. So unless it's like a doctor or something like that. So, or if it's a number that's similar to yours and except the last two digits are different, then it's like some weird stuff going on there.
Yeah, that was a big thing, and then you start to see a lot of numbers. You'll get a lot of unknown numbers from local area codes. That was a big thing. You get the whole, "Hey, I'm Barbara from Google." You get that a lot, especially.
Yeah. What the hell is that? Yeah. What the hell is that?
Well, keep in mind that they have Google Duplex, and that's a fairly robust system from an artificial intelligence standpoint. They can basically sound like Cardi B if they wanted to. You would never know.
Yeah, I've seen I've caught those, but yeah, I'm just said I don't even answer. When I see some of these calls, I don't even answer them. I block most of them. I block like all this shit, but I do see that. I do get what I call marketing calls, and these calls are kind of weird, and they're weird.
All right, let me jump to this next article. Yeah, so rule of thumb: make sure you don't install these rogue browser plugins on your Chrome browser or your Firefox browser, because you don't know what you're installing unless you verify it. Trust but verify.
Yep.
Paleface once said.
Yeah, another thing is also if you're putting these, and I had this happen this week with a customer, she was running out of memory or something like that, or the browser tab said she was running out of memory. And if you install some of these plugins, they can cause all types of issues with websites that you use on a regular basis. In this case, it was one of those text highlighters or text linkers. So it'll take text in the page itself and say, if it's a computer, it'll link it to some other advertising or shopping or something like that. So that can also cause adverse effects on your day-to-day use of a computer as well.
All right. This next one is from Linux Journal. Shrinking Linux attack surfaces. Oh, man, this is going to be a doozy. Expand this out. Often, the kernel developer will try to reduce the size of an attack surface against Linux, even if it can't be closed entirely. It's generally a toss-up whether such a patch makes it into the kernel. Linus Torvalds always prefer prefers security patches that really close a hole rather than just give attackers a slightly harder time of it. Matthew Garrett recognized that user space applications might have secret data that might be sitting in RAM at any given time, and that those applications might want to wipe that data clean so no one could look at it. There were various ways to do this already in the kernel, as Matthew pointed out. An application could see mlock to prevent its memory contents from being pushed into swap, where it might be read more easily by attackers. An application also could use ATEX to cause its memory to be thoroughly overwritten when application exited, thus leaving no secret data in general pool of available RAM. The problem, as we pointed out, came if an attacker was able to reboot the system at a critical moment, say before the user's data could be safely overwritten. If attackers then booted into different OSs, different operating systems, they might be able to examine the data still stored in RAM, left over from previously running Linux systems. As Matthew also noted, the existing way to prevent even that was to tell the UEFI firmware to wipe system memory before booting to another OS. But this would dramatically increase the amount of time it took to reboot. And if the good guys had won out over the attackers, forcing them to wait a long time for a reboot could be considered a denial of service attack, or at least downright annoying. Ideally, Matthew said if the attackers were only able to induce a clean shutdown, not simply a cold boot, then there needed to be a way to tell Linux to scrub all data of RAM, so there would be no further need for UEFI to handle it, and thus no need for a very long delay during reboot. Matthew explained the reasoning behind his patch. He said, unfortunately, if an application exits uncleanly, its secrets may still be present in RAM. This can't be easily fixed in userland. If the OOM killer decides to kill a process holding secrets, we're not going to be able to avoid that. And so this patch adds a new flag to madvice to allow userland to request that the kernel clear the covered pages whenever the page reference count is 0. Since VM flags is already full on 32-bit, it will only work on 64-bit systems. What's happening here is that you have a vulnerability that's available. Basically, if your computer goes into a sleep mode, or even your printers are very vulnerable to this because they send clear text data to the printer itself, and the printer has a hard drive and it has memory in it. For network printers, I'm referring to MFPs, multifunctional printers. Data is still being held inside memory. Just because just because you can't see it initially on the hard drive doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's still there until you pull the plug, until you pull the power on the system. So this is why it's very important to understand that attack surface, that attack vector, in terms of security, because you could very well find yourself in a situation that's a resume generating event.
Yeah, on Linux-based systems, you got to be careful with swap. We do disable swap on many of our systems, because basically what Linux likes to do is, well, pages that aren't being used, it will write the swap, even if it doesn't have to. Even if you have enough memory, it'll just do it. That's basically what the kernel, the basic install kernel, unless you change that, which most people don't, does. from what I know, the only OS that offers encrypted swap is like the BSDs. I think OpenBSD or FreeBSD or something like that. So what these guys are trying to do is, I guess, try to protect where an attacker can basically shut down the machine and just read the hard drive and try to get some data off the swap partition.
OpenBSD, I know it does it by default. FreeBSD and Net, I'm not sure.
Oh, by default, nice.
Yeah,
I'm not an OpenBSD user.
OpenBSD is a little harder.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a security-based distro from the ground up. Yeah, but we disable swap entirely on many of our systems. We have a lot of memory, but we don't. It's never written to disk. The applications they start up. They take a basic set of memory and they work with that. No need to write or anything like that to the hard drive.
And just to add to what you're saying, I mean, pretty much swap is really not needed anymore because of the mass amount of RAM that's in a lot of systems nowadays. You don't really need it unless you're doing a whole bunch of heavy intensive application work or whatever. It's really not needed.
Yeah, that's true, because I remember my first computer had what? It was a 5 gig hard drive and like 32 megabytes of memory.
Yeah,
So,
that's when it was needed.
Yeah. So the installation instructions would say, okay, you need to like 64 meg, like double the memory.
Yep.
But now we have a system with 512 gigs of memory. So it's crazy.
You also have elasticity in something like Amazon or Azure, where you can scale up if you need more resources. So on the fly.
Yeah.
But this is where we are, from a security standpoint. This is a nightmare. It's something you got to deal with. You have your SysAdmins, your SysEngineers, but you also have to have security do their assessment on implementations of infrastructure. So this is a part of that.
Yeah, now we're moving from running the apps on the system, on the hardware directly into Docker. Well, we're trying to move to Kubernetes. We have a test platform that we're testing everything out, but basically the way we do run the apps isn't the best, I would say. We don't enable SE Linux on any of these security profiles, and when they move to these newer cloud-based machines, internal cloud-based machines running Kubernetes and Docker, this is where they're going to enable these IaaS guys. We're mostly on the PaaS, which is the platform as a service team. They're going to enable like much more security context aware things so that our applications can run in. But yeah, this is all new, and this has all been brought up by, in the last year also with I don't know if you remember the Spectre attack. That was a big thing in the meltdown.
Yeah, Spectre. Intel.
Yeah. And we had to do a lot of kernel patches for that, which actually slowed us down a lot, probably 20%. Yeah, so I guess that's where, because usually Linux is not, these Linux kernel guys, especially the main guy, Linus Torvalds, he's known as a guy that likes to keep Linux stable, and he has a saying that he doesn't like to break userland. Like he always wants to keep everything running. He's not known as a security conscious dude, so that's why the BSDs are more on point with that in general. All the security stuff you see in Linux, SC Linux came from the CIA or one of these 3-letter agencies, the NSA, I think. And I think App Armor, I think that comes from the Ubuntu camp. But Linux on its own is, these kernel guys. You can make it if you're the type of guy that likes to compile your old kernels, which nobody does anymore. You could make it really, and you could really reduce the attack services by just disabling a lot of stuff.
Services, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I know about Linus, that he's like, been under fire for, especially working with the security community, is that he'll say, you guys want to put a lot of this stuff in the kernel, but that's not where it belongs. So I've seen him say that quite a bit and defend the, I guess, the purity of the kernel itself by saying, hey, a lot of that security stuff that you're having problems with, you need to fix on the application level and not so much with the actual kernel itself, because what you're doing is injecting all types of other code that's in there that might cause instability. And pretty much just a credit to what you were saying. And as far as swap, it's one of those things where I kind of just do it by default, but you guys are totally right. Like I'm looking at one of the sites that I use for getting refurbished systems, and I can get like a Dell R910, an E7 processor, and 40 cores, and like a terabyte worth of RAM for like $3,000. Like right now.
Damn.
So it's kind of like, yeah, 1,024 gig, terabyte worth of RAM, and and that is probably the most expensive thing on the build if I was just going through the picker right now at $2,100. So yeah, you don't really need swap anymore. I never considered that. Thanks.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. All right, let me get to this last article. All right, this one is from ZDNet. The new ransomware is targeting network-attached storage devices.
Yeah, I just heard about this with QNAP, right? Yep.
Newly discovered form of ransomware is targeting network storage devices by brute force weak credentials and exploiting known vulnerabilities in their systems. Dubbed E256, after a string of code, the new form of file locking malware emerged in June and has been detailed by cybersecurity researchers at Anomaly. The ransomware specifically targets QNAP network-attached storage devices produced by Taiwanese firm QNAP Systems, which has offices in 16 countries and customers around the world. Several vulnerabilities have been discovered in QNAP NAS devices in recent years. Although the company has patched them after they've been discovered and disclosed, however, many organizations struggle to apply patches in a timely manner. The attackers are opportunistic, with the initial infection coming via unsecured internet-facing ports and the use of brute force attacks to bypass weak login credentials. NAS devices make appealing targets by cyber criminals dealing in ransomware because they are used to store critical data and backups. But despite this, the devices don't tend to be equipped with security software. Publicly exposed systems and devices expand overall attack surfaces and increase the potential for vulnerabilities to be exposed and exploited. Joaquin Kennedy, Threat Intelligence Manager in the Anomaly Threat Research Team. Ransomware attacks are going to continue as a way for threat actors to attempt to monetize their efforts and disrupt operations for other objectives. Written in the Go programming language and described as very simple, the source code is fewer than 400 lines. E256 checks to see if the files are already encrypted before reaching out to command and control server to begin the encryption process and create an AES 256 encryption key to lock the files with a encrypt extension. Users are presented with a ransom note informing that all of the data has been locked and directing them to a Tor website to make ransom payment in Bitcoin. Users also warned not to tamper with the encrypted data. Researchers suggest spelling errors in the ransom note indicate that those behind the ransomware aren't native English speakers. In order to protect NAS devices against ransomware attacks, it is recommended that users restrict external access to them so that they can't be found from the outside internet. It is also recommended that security patches are applied and strong credentials are employed to protect systems from brute force attacks. You should have a pretty good firewall if you don't already have one. I recommend that. I also recommend if you're going to use one of these at home, you should be patching on a monthly basis.
Yeah, this is the same thing that happened with DDWRT quite a few years ago, and a lot of these other like control panels for some of these like home devices, if you will. And just kind of like nothing new, really. You really shouldn't have that stuff facing outward. You should have some type of like box that you can access on your network that has a little bit more robust security, and then access your stuff from there, almost like via VPN tunnel or what have you.
Yeah, I agree. Boxes such you should. Why does anyone have a NAS device facing the public internet? I just bought about a month ago. I just bought some Chinese made. I bought it from one of these. What is that? Alibaba. It's a 4-port. It's basically an Intel 86 box. It's really small. A lot of people use it for. It has 4 ports, switchable ports that you can define for anything, and you install pfSense on it. It works great, man, as a home-based cheap firewall.
What's the brand?
It's called I gotta put it in the chat. It's called Quotum. Okay. I mean, yeah, I'll put it in the chat. But what's really good about one thing I never had at home is I have DDO, your typical Wi-Fi router running DDWRT, but at home I never knew it was actually going in and out. So with pfSense, you can see in real time, if you want, all the traffic that's going in and out from your phones, the TVs, all your IoT devices, stuff like that. So and then I don't use my Wi-Fi router as the firewall anymore. So I have a dedicated firewall for my house, something I never would have thought to do before. But it's really cool when you see like, oh, okay, this bandwidth, like your internet's going slow. You're trying to see what's going on, and you say, okay, it's my boy over there downloading. I let him use my Wi-Fi, so he's doing his thing. And it's so powerful. You can traffic shake. You can say, okay, this type of traffic can only take this much bandwidth on my network. This type of traffic, do this. So if you have like a little brother or sister or whatever that's always torrenting, stuff like that, you can limit them. Really cool.
Yeah, I use a ASUS router myself. I have Fios, but they kind of shove that their proprietary device down your throat. But I do use my ASUS router as a wireless access point, and I have that pretty locked down too. So I never connect directly to the Verizon modem because it's horrific. It doesn't have great uptime. It's not really secure, and I have more granular controls over the wireless access point than I do the router itself. So
yeah, I use pfSense for my house. The one I have currently is via a virtual machine on Proxmox. Which works very well.
So you're running Prox that runs but
yeah, so I'm running Proxmox as my hypervisor.
Yeah.
Or my virtualization platform, which is just what's it called, like a GUI on top, a GUI and some tools, I should say. It's more than that.
No,
On top of KVM.
yeah, I use it too. Like I was running VMware ESXi for a while,
Mhm.
and I just switched to Proxmox because just try it out, and I just stuck with it.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Proxmox is great. Yeah.
I don't have it facing. I have it internally, but I don't run it. I never thought of that, running a pfSense within it and having that interface on the internet itself.
Yeah, I've used that for. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but then you gotta leave that computer on 24/7.
Yeah, I just have it running like as my I have that running in my garage, and then go from there.
Okay.
Well, I mean, unless you're running like an i7 or something like that, or dual Xeons, I don't know if that's going to be that bad. I mean, you can actually run, Raspberry Pi or something like that, or not Raspberry Pi, an Intel NUC, an NUC, right?
Yeah, the Nooks. Yeah.
Yeah, you can run one of those to actually do all of that fairly easily, without too much compromise on electricity and thermal characteristics.
Yeah, like an i5 and even an i7 will definitely work, because at my salon I do an i5 on I think a Lenovo, one of those small SFF machines that can fit behind your monitor, and you can put on a VESA mount. And I run that, and I use, I just use VLAN tagging, and I have one interface. So then via that, with a Cisco switch on the other side of it, I can get, a WAN and a LAN interface off of one actual physical interface. So I virtualize my interfaces, and then I have a virtual machine. And on that Lenovo box, that very skinny small box, I have that running Proxmox, and then has I think I had 3 different VMs on there, and it works great.
But to support the VLAN tagging, you have a managed switch.
Yes. So the other side of that is a Cisco 3560, I believe, is what's at the shop.
Cisco. I mean, I want a managed switch, but I don't want like an airplane running in my room. A lot of them are loud. I want something cheap, but all the ones I've seen are pretty pricey.
They are going to be pricey. Give me a sec. I'll say this real quick. I just bought one the other day. Give me a sec. I'll be back and I'll look this up. But
there's always people reselling it. They'll get the equipment for like taking the test or whatever. And since you're in the IT field, I'm pretty sure you know somebody that probably has some of these equipment they can sell to you for a cheaper price, way cheaper price than what you get anywhere else.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't sound like an airplane.
Yeah, I got you.
No, yeah, I had a buddy. He gave me his I forgot what it was called, but I turned it on. I couldn't sleep. I needed something, but yeah, back to the article. One thing because most of everybody I know run Synologies as their backup solutions or whatever at home, and I don't know anyone that runs them like facing the internet. So like that have them directly on the internet like that. Like everybody has it in their internal LAN, behind some private IP.
Mm-hmm. But some people have those older NASs and they don't really know what they're doing, and they got them facing the internet, and they don't patch them, and actually the companies kind of neglect them as well with patches.
Mm-hmm.
And the PA make it so hard that people just don't patch it, to find the actual patches for the software on their system. So I mean,
crazy.
Renal, check the chat, but you can get the fanless units, and then even the Cisco, I think 2950s, which are older, have little to no fans in them. But yeah, you're gonna run into that. But even if you get the units that I put in the chat, you're still gonna have. I recommend that you still have a fan, even like a small USB fan, blowing on them, just so they can get some type of air circulation. Okay. And that USB fan is usually pretty quiet anyway. I have 2 of those running and a USB fan blowing onto it on my little mini dev rack in my room.
Good stuff. Nice. Okay, the only way I could see me having some type of QNAP or Synology facing the internet if I'm port forwarding. Like I would usually port forward SSH so I can SSH to my house. So if they're saying that's one of the services, then okay, I got that. I don't know what other services that these guys use to. Well, they did say weak password, so
Those boxes are great, but I recently had a customer that had a disaster, and I had to give it a public IP address. So it was only for a limited time. But you can also on those boxes, even if you give it that, there is some firewalling that you can actually do, especially on the Synology box. QNAPs, I'm not too sure about, but really you should not have those as a rule of thumb for those smaller devices, for your NASs, even the DDWRT or anything else like that. You really shouldn't have that accessible via the internet, even on non-standard ports. So even if you wanted to be somewhat tricky or clever and put it on 444 as opposed to 443, still you have to just be careful with that. But I do expose a lot of times my PFSense boxes.
I do the security security through security thing where you just change the port, and I know I don't do it like to feel safe or anything like that. I just do it because I get tired of my logs, getting, and this is for my personal boxes. I mean, I rent some boxes on, they got these cheap cloud boxes you can get $5 a month or something. And I just change the SSH ports because if you don't, then your logs are just filled with all these attempts. And I don't enable password authentication. I mean, they're not getting in without a certificate or anything. But I mean, just for my sanity on the logs, I always change the port to a non-standard, like 222, 2222, something like that. And yeah, that's called security through security because if a guy's really after you, he'll go out, he'll target you or whatever. But I mean, it helps with all the stupid Chinese older scanners out there that just run forever on port 22 and all that.
Yeah, doing that actually slows down the attacks a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well,
I
can attest. Oh, go ahead.
No, go right ahead. I'll come after you.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, and I could attest. I forgot to say that earlier when you was going through the SSH thing. I can attest to the logs and seeing all the hits coming on my server from all these people from different companies. But go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, there's another software like if you don't want to open your ports at all, but yet you want access to your if you have Linux boxes, stuff like that, you can do what it does. I forgot what it's called. What it does basically, it connects to your local instance and it creates a lot of the Windows tools do that, where these guys, you give them a link and they log in, like log me in and all that. I don't know.
Yeah.
If anyone,
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it connects to your local instance, but it creates a socket on one of their servers with some random URL. So you connect to that URL, and then you get to your house. And it's called ngrok, NGROK. It's free. You're not going crazy with it, and I use that sometimes too. If you want to, like, if you want to get source. Yeah, it's open source. It's written in Go, actually. It connects to your local service, whatever that service, any service actually. It could, even if you're running Windows, since it's written in Go, it'll run in Windows. So if you want to say you have a Windows box, you want to connect to your local RDP service, you just connect to the local port. It'll give you a URL. You copy that URL. You go anywhere, and you connect to their servers through a tunnel, and you're at home basically without opening anything. And that's how all the log me ins and PC go to my PC stuff. That's how they work. But what I like about this is just a simple one binary. You know, you don't have to go all crazy. And I mean, it's mainly geared for Linux, FreeBSD, whatever. But it'll work on Windows too. If you're the type, because I always like to do connect home sometimes, even from work. And you know, a lot of times I don't like to open any ports.
Here's my take before we close out at 11:30. I think going forward, cybersecurity won't be as siloed as it is right now. I think what's going to happen is that sysadmins will eventually pick up a lot more security responsibilities as they leverage tools, open source tools, proprietary tools, to actually do a lot of the work that is necessary for security analysts. You have different, SIMs, which is Security Information Event Management System, that have machine learning and AI built into it, and it's fairly robust, if I must say, at least to my experience with Rapid7. That being said, you spend less time chasing threats and more time doing other things as a sysadmin. So you don't have to actually sit down and go through incident after incident after incident. And also some of the automation tools, such as the Misto for security orchestration, Command, which was acquired by Rapid7, and a couple of others, allow you to actually streamline a lot of the would-be tedious remedial work. So I do think that sysadmins will pick up some portions of security responsibility that most security analysts are doing right now, probably by next year, because of some of the tools have been fairly revamped for that very reason.
Mike, if I may, I had a couple of things that I wanted to mention that I've been working with recently that I think would be pretty cool. So,
okay,
when we have time for that, let me know.
Go ahead.
Well, first, two things that I think a lot of guys should really start getting into, especially if you're a consultant or just a sysadmin at a job day to day. Start implementing what I like to call user firewalls. So start doing things like more training with the user base as much as possible. And there's other things out there. I think there's like Know Before, or I think it's Know Before. But you start doing things to really train the users and really educate the users on what to do and what not to do. And there's a couple tools that you can use for that are out there. That I've actually worked with other people on, and it's very important because people are just not educated, and that's why. Somebody Know Before. Okay, that was right. A lot of people are just not educated, and sometimes what you have to do is test them yourself and send out emails or have services that send out emails that try to screw people over, and then you can see who's messing up, and then make sure that they go through some type of training. Another open source tool, OpenVAS, having tools like that on your local network or across that scan your systems for any type of vulnerabilities. So making sure that you're doing your own penetration testing, if possible, get a service or a penetration testing service provider that does it. I have a friend that has worked in that, and he's doing quite well with it. But two things that I've been really researching a lot, or even using myself to cut down some of the network bloat, is ad blockers, and doing ad blocking at the WAN side. So using PF Blocker NG, I just started testing that recently, but I've been using uBlock as the Chrome extension. but doing things to actually protect the users from like those ads that they click on or ads that might have been hacked on the ad server itself. Doing things like that have been very. I think that's going to be something that if you're going to bring that, or if you're going to be valuable to your team, bringing that to people where it can actually cut down their bandwidth usage. I was reading a small article the other day where a guy said, "Hey, one article that I think was on CNN or something like that was 12 megs, and
Damn.
when he enabled his ad blocker, it went down to 1 meg for that same web page. So you're looking at a decrease in bandwidth, traffic, and so on and so forth. Also, you're looking at another attack vector that has been eliminated, possibly at the gateway and then even in the browser. So that's another thing. And one thing I've also seen, and this is the last thing, is GitHub. So some of my projects, like Lodash, is a popular npm repository or npm um, package, and it's in a lot of different projects. And with Lodash, it had a recent vulnerability that was discovered. And GitHub, what they're doing is they're actually scanning your projects or your package.json file if you're using Node.js, and they're scanning that to see if there's any like versions that are susceptible to any type of vulnerabilities or attacks that have been put out there. And there's also services that are scanning these things as well. So those are the things that I've been looking at lately. Biggest thing is the ad blocking, and I'm actually going to implement that in the next 2 or 3 projects that I have planned, that I've put proposals out for this week.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good.
Good stuff.
Anybody else have anything you want to add before we close out?
Yeah, it's a great panel. I mean, going down the list of the things that were talked about today. I mean, people who want to get into Linux, yeah, install it at home. I mean, it's really easy. Well, it's not easy, but it just takes a lot of commitment. Well, I remember when I started, I think in 03, 04, you couldn't even get proper sound drivers to get music playing. But you stick through it, you get to learn all the stuff. Today, I mean, everything just works. It's almost as easy to install as a Windows system if you're installing systems. On the extension side, I do agree. Users should be running ad blocks of any sort. I run a extension called U-Matrix. It's a little more powerful. I don't think normal users should be running it because what it does, it disables everything, and like JavaScript won't run, CSS, anything. The page looks blank, and you have to selectively choose what to run, and you keep choosing until the page works, and then you just you save your settings for that page, and half the ads don't run and anything like that. That's pretty good. And run your own firewalls. Something new I started to do, even though I've been in this space for a while, but I've always relied on these these ASUS DDWRT images, but I'm realizing even those have their limitations. So that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
Christian, you have anything? I think Christian is sleeping. Josh.
Yeah, I just want to say great panel. It was good to talk to some brothers in the field, and just on the overall topics. A lot of articles were on Linux, just like what Ronald said, but that's what I do. I'm an advocate for Linux, and I try to get people to use Linux on their personal systems, and get into it, as well as if you want to get into the whole um, systems administration side when it comes to Linux systems. But I mean, just get in there and play with it. It's not as difficult as you think. You don't a lot of distributions out there nowadays. You don't even really have to touch the command line as much as you
Yep.
used to back in the day. So I mean, it's just get in there and play around with it, and you figure it out or whatever. Especially if you're looking at getting into it, because I mean, just I think one of you guys said it earlier. I think Young Grizzly said it, or one of you guys said it, but just get rid of all your all your Windows computers, man, and install Linux on it, and just force yourself to get into it and learn it if you really want to get into um the rail side of the house and all that when it comes to um security. So
I just see the command lines and all that. I think that's what kind of gets people a little bit miffed because Linux is so, or even just Unix is so keyed on the command lines and the commands that you have to be up on. So I think that might be a little, some people might find that a little bit daunting. But you're saying that is not the case today, and it's something that's
yeah,
much easier. So
yeah,
It is quite daunting, but it's something that is the power of the system. You
certainly.
can break your boxes on it, and then you're also seeing where Windows is moving towards that as well. Although their command line is just it's crazy the commands that you can have in it, but you're seeing where they see the power in it as well.
Mm, mm,
yeah. Just to
mm.
add to that, like certain just a point. Use this as an example. I believe Mike was talking about OrSync over SSH or whatever,
Hmm.
where a lot of the applications on there they have a GUI version of it, and the GUI version of OrSync is GOrSync, and GOrSync, you can select everything you want to do when you're OrSyncing, and it'll actually give you the example of the command that you would run in the command in the terminal. It'll show you the example of it, and then you can run it. You can copy and paste that and put it in the terminal, or you can run it through the GUI. So, you know, it's it's getting to the point where some stuff does. Oh, a lot of stuff doesn't need. You don't need to run the command line as much as you
Nope.
used to, unless you're getting into server functions.
Yep.
So,
That makes it definitely a little bit easier. Yeah, that would So yeah, I would guess even for myself, who was not really a serious programmer, I know a lot about technology, being that I'm a recruiter and I know all the technology certainly, and how a lot of and how they use, but still getting into that can be a little can be a little tough for somebody who may not be, let's say, as competent as someone like yourself.
Yeah, you take your time to study it and
Yep.
get familiar with it, and just go in there and screw up. Um,
Well, I think that's the whole thing. You don't want to be screwing up, man.
Oh yeah, and that's why you need to do it at home, man. Like my home lab, I used to have a full 42U 7 foot rack in my garage with AC unit and all that stuff, and I really what would you say? You cut your teeth on that type of stuff. But
Yeah.
I really got into it, and I think that's what people really have to do. They have to immerse themselves into it, as I mentioned earlier, if you really want to get into it. So it is hard
Certainly,
though. I'm not gonna lie, but it's rewarding.
certainly.
and another reason that's why I point out it's free. I
Mhm.
always point that out. It's free operating system. So you ain't got to worry about keys. You ain't got to worry about subscription to anything. If you mess it up, just wipe it and reinstall. Good to go. That's all I got, fellas, though.
Oh, that's cool. Nicole, you have any recommendations, any thoughts, closing thoughts?
Yeah, man. My recommendations are people should be listening to these brothers here. They great repository of information that's coming through, especially for the tech heads. But you have to if you want to get into this, you definitely have to dedicate some time and put some effort into it. So that's what I would have to say. I think this is great information. I got a little bit late. I'm kind of in the middle of a few things here tonight, but I said I would just drop in, and man, this is just great stuff. Great hangout, great information, guys. Great information.
Yeah, definitely. Christian, can you hear us? Are you back? I guess not. Yeah, make sure you guys There's a book out. I don't know if they still even make it. Called the Linux Bible, if I remember correctly. Actually, a good book to have as a reference. That's good. That's good. Plus the Security Plus. You know, you want to get into security. That's like the bare benchmark. You should actually read that book front to back before you even go taking the exam. Maybe log into CBT Nuggets. Take one of their videos as well. That's actually pretty good. Cybrary is actually really good as a resource. So if you go to cybrary.com, I know 4th of July they had a mega sale for like 65% off of for training. Can't really beat that for a year. And yeah, don't just focus on certifications. Focus on actual ability to do the work, to perform the work. Linux Foundation, I left the link in the chat. You know, that sale is on until 7/22. I think that's July 22nd. So make sure you guys get up on that. You know, discounted certification and training. So you're getting the training involved plus the certification plus one free retake. You can't beat that. I don't know any other certification group that allows that. And yeah, that's all I really have. Make sure you guys hit the like button if you have not already done so, if you're just now joining, and share the video if possible too. There's other people out there who may want to hear brothers talking about this type of stuff. Also, if you have not checked out the Black Business Intelligence Talk, make sure you check that out from today about Black women in automation, how that's going to impact them going forward.
Mm.
Yeah, and as always, guys, I mean, you know, thanks for this. I think I gotta show up more often, so appreciate you all.
Yeah, no doubt, man, no doubt. We haven't seen you in quite some time around here, man. So
yeah, listen, if you check my GitHub, you'll see why.
yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine, man. I can definitely imagine. All right, peace.